Now, I'm going to read you a cautionary fable. I want you to listen to this intently, all right? So that it will hopefully improve your loathsome table manners. This is a story about a boy called Timothy Tate, okay?
Yeah.
This is the tale of Timothy Tate, a child too vile to contemplate. Obese, belligerent and rude, young Timmy was obsessed by food. Whole sides of beef and legs of mutton could not appease this little glutton. He'd wolf down trifles by the score, lick clean his plate and scream for more. As if afflicted by a curse, his appetites grew more diverse. Despite his parents' frosty stares, he'd often gnaw through legs of chairs. He'd munch with unashamed glee through carpets and upholstery, and household pets too slow to flee would often vanish utterly. The parents of his friends, in fear, forbade their offspring to go near, lest they should end up as a feast for this demented little beast. He stalked alone, shunned by his peers in verdant woodlands growing near, and at the tremor of his tread, the timid forest creatures fled. One evening, as he dined on twigs, a sound disturbed this prince of pigs, and looking up, saw something bright descending from the starry night. The glowing disc dropped from the sky towards a leafy glade nearby, and from its hatch, as Timmy hid, a brace of curious creatures slid. Who knows from what dim distant star this puzzling pair had journeyed far, but Tim, his beady eyes alert, had but one thought, which was dessert. The comics code in America has had some quite specific laws drawn up about how to treat things like violence and sex in comics. It's, I suppose, a precursor of the Rambo mentality, where you can show horrific violence happening, hot lead flying everywhere, nobody gets scratched. And I've had people attack my books because they show a childbirth, or because they show violence realistically, with the blood, because they show human sexuality, hopefully realistically, because they show human politics realistically. And I've had people saying, oh, this is destroying the innocence of childhood, you know, sort of how can you push this sort of depressing, sordid, real-world filth down the mouths of our kids? I mean, the main thing that seems to irritate them seems to me to be political, in that they want us to show superheroes and other comic characters as perpetual Boy Scouts. They don't want us to show a world in which authority can ever be corrupt, or in which anything ever goes wrong. And the main thing that they cite as a reason for this is that it is harmful to the small and vulnerable minds of children, which, obviously I'm a parent myself, I mean, I've got Leah and Amber, and basically my feeling is that the world that we have been careless enough to leave laying around for our children to inherit is a place which is sometimes hostile, which is sometimes dangerous, which has got a lot of very frightening edges to it. And the only way that I can help my children, the only real sort of chance that I can give them of securing their emotional and physical and psychological survival, is to actually tell them about the stuff that's going on in the world. If there are sort of nuclear pollutants and poisons laying around, let's tell them about that. If there are psychopaths lurking upon every street corner, they should know. I don't think that it does children any service to present them this artificial, pastel-coloured Care Bear world in which everybody is friendly, everybody wants to hug each other. Listen, Pally boy, there's people who fought in Dunkirk in the last war, and if you ask them about all of this, they'd think that it was a load of bollocks. I wouldn't say that. Recently, I've been working with a group called the CCCO in America, which is helping conscientious objectors. Maybe if there'd been people doing comics like the one that we're intending to do, which will be working with actual servicemen giving their memory of what real life was like in the forces, maybe if there'd been more people back then who were able to point out just what the reality of warfare was, maybe some of those people who were at Dunkirk would have more limbs or fingers than they had now, or less dead friends. Oh, well, in that case, forgive me, not just bollocks then, subversive bollocks. Is that the case? It seems to me that anything these days which is slightly to the left of Genghis Khan is immediately labelled subversive. If in our schools children are taught that there shouldn't be antagonism and disharmony between black kids and white kids, if they're taught that it's perhaps not the nicest thing in the world to shout abuse at homosexuals in the street, this is immediately labelled as subversive and a danger to the fabric of our great nation. If, in this current time, tolerance and sensitivity of any kind are labelled loony left or subversive, then I would be quite proud to be considered as subversive. did an episode of Swamp Thing entitled The Nuke Face Papers, which dealt with this horrible irradiated wino called Nuke Face, who used to drink nuclear sludge instead of methylated spirits. And we'd have him walking through the swamps, leaving luminous blue footprints wherever he trod, and the fruit would be growing riper and rotting and falling off the trees as he passed. At the end of the story, we have him waking up after most of the other characters believe that he's dead, but in fact he's just been sleeping off a hangover. And we have him rise to his feet and realise that he's got no more of the nuclear waste which he needs to sustain him. So we have him stumbling off into the bayous, just this wrecked and sort of debilitated figure, and he's saying, I know that there's some more of it out there somewhere, and if I have to look all over this country, I'm going to find it. If I have to look in every state, in every neighbourhood, in every street, I'm going to find it. And then he walks off into the bayou, just shambling, leaving the dead grass behind him, poisoning everything he touches, and he says, Heads up, America! Here I come! When we did that episode, to underline the threat, we had actual newspaper clippings blowing through the swamp that we'd taken from various newspapers that we'd read concerning nuclear waste spillages and steam escapes and things like that. Particularly, we used a lot of clippings from the test areas in Utah where the Americans dropped their atom bombs. These were clippings from school teachers who'd said, yes, I can remember the children coming in every morning to school and saying, did you see it, Mrs. Kelsey? Did you see the flash? And there were even more distressing ones from parents who said, yes, it was a big deal out here to watch the mushroom clouds glow up. We used to take the children out in their bathing costumes to watch. And after we published the issue, we got an awful lot of response from the readers saying it was a great story. But all those clippings you used, they weren't real, were they? But of course, they were. And there's an old Chinese adage that if the artist does not feel excited or sad or happy when he's drawing the picture, he has no right to expect the audience to feel those emotions. You have to invest a work of art with a degree of intensity, an intensity of feeling upon your part, in order for that to communicate. Well, come on, I mean, what makes you special? I mean, you're just a jerk like everybody else. What makes you think that you know what's going on? I know as well as anybody else is what is going on. That all that anybody upon this particular planet can do, finding themselves surrounded by a web of information, much of which might be untrue, some of which may be valid, they have to make up their own mind. They have to think as much as they can about what is right, try to work out what courses of action seem to be the most pro-survival, which courses of action are going to make things a little bit better and certainly not hurt anybody else. As somebody who lived through the latter part of the 60s and the early 70s, obviously I believe that people's minds can be changed. That if you shout about something vehemently enough, it might make a difference. It is obviously a very big factor if you're planning a power plant, just what the political consensus is in the area where you're planning to build it. If there are an awful lot of people who are fanatically anti-nuclear, it might just be better to sort of leave that area alone and build it somewhere else. There is no doubt about it that this is an element in 1980s politics. That if you're going to have to go through a massive fight with local protest groups, you can add another $500,000 onto your costs. It hits people in the wallet, which, I mean, like, I think that really it would be naive to expect to sort of hit them in the conscience. What do the dead people think about on those long and sleepless nights beneath the ground when the tree roots press against their backs like wrinkles in the bed sheets? Do they watch the miniature dynasties of beetles unfold before their gaze and give names to them, repeating themselves often? Do they spend 50 years trying to remember what peaches smelled like? What do the dead think about? And what do they think of us?